0017. The hissing of pressurized gas echoed through the labyrinth's intestines. Each step Elaine took sent a slick splash through the bioluminescent mucosa beneath her feet. The floor of this living maze pulsing faintly like the diaphragm of a sleeping beast. She didn't look back, she didn't need to. The predator was close, too close. And it could smell her. Her thermal visor flickered. Data blinked across her peripheral field in cold cyan. Fluctuating temperature gradients, pressure spikes, pulse waves. But none of it mattered now, except for the rapid flicker of something in the top left corner. Incoming heat signature, 43. 7 degrees C increasing asterisk. It was hunting her, and it wasn't alone. A sudden howl split the corridor. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't human. It was pain-seared, liquefied pain. Elaine rounded the corner and stopped. Just ahead, sprawled across the corridor wall like a grotesque mural, was what remained of a Ca-Trant, a dual-headed alien predator species that fed on spinal fluids. Its flesh steamed, 2 skulls fused into a bubbling mass. Skin boiled off its frame. Thermal spike zone asterisk. Elaine's mind filled in the blank. The Ca-Trant had wandered into a trap. One of the maze's organic vents had opened at the wrong time, releasing a jet of hyperoxygenated plasma gas, or the right time. Depending on who or what was watching, she didn't have time to mourn the thing. Her own body heat was rising. Every breath she took added to the trail. She knew the rules of this game too well. Survive. 3 hours, no help, no escape. The labyrinth was not just a battleground. It was the weapon. She reached a fork in the corridor. One path pulsed with a faint red glow, the other descended into complete darkness. She reached up, unsnapped the thermal mask from her face and pressed it against the red glowing wall. The sticky membrane absorbed the mask like it was feeding on it. Good, the heat signature would linger for at least 90 seconds. Maybe enough. She darted into the dark, then froze. Footsteps, not skittering claws, not talons, not the wet dragging of bioarmor, but calculated, confident steps echoing with eerie precision. A shimmer passed through the air, almost invisible. And that's when she realized it wasn't an alien asterisk. It was a man, or something man-like. Tarsa, she'd read the brief. Planet Tarsa had once been Earth's ally in cybernetic warfare theory, until they defected and began splicing high-density thermal tech into their soldiers. The Tarsan representative was said to wear armor that bent heat like light, rendering them invisible to most spectrums, but not to her. Not to Elaine Holt asterisk, the only contestant without a weapon, but with something far more dangerous. An implanted prototype thermal sensor, grafted directly into her left ocular nerve. She pulled back into a crevice in the corridor wall. Her breath slowed, her pulse didn't, her left eye twitched. Then adjusted. The shimmer returned closer now, just a meter away. It hovered for a moment, as if confused by the heat signature of the mask still seeping from the wall. She smiled grimly, then memory hit her like a flash burn. A white room, a tribunal, the words biological sabotage and treason. A glass window shattering as she screamed, "You're programming them wrong. You're breeding rage, not cognition." Elaine hadn't broken the system. She had tried to fix it, redirect the weaponized genome in Earth's biowar beasts towards sentient behavior. But they'd buried the truth, labeled her insane, offered her 2 options, lethal injection. Or this, the labyrinth. She said yes, not because she wanted to live, but because she refused to die silently. And now here she was, 17 minutes in. Heart pounding against her ribs like a prisoner, clawing for release. The shimmer stepped forward again. Elaine reached into her jacket pocket, fingers wrapping around a smooth, round object. Her ocular implant. She de-removed it during the last prep phase, too dangerous to leave active. But now it had a new purpose, with one smooth motion. She pressed the sensor into the soft lining of her sleeve and triggered its pulse. A tiny burst of heat flared, subtle but just enough. The shimmer froze. She took 2 steps back, deliberately slow, leading it away, toward the corridor she'd mapped in her mind. She knew this maze's structure better than any of them. Because she hadn't trained in combat. She'd trained in biology. And this maze wasn't synthetic. It was alive. And like any living thing, it had a nervous system. She led the Tarson down a winding shaft lined with sensory ganglia, fleshy nodes sensitive to heat and motion. Too much stimulation would trigger a defense reflex. She counted in her head, 6 more steps. The air grew thick, humming. The ganglia began to pulse. 5 steps. The shimmer drew closer, unsure now but locked onto her signal. 4, the temperature spiked. 3, she ducked 2. The wall ahead split open, expelling a violent jet of plasma-infused acid. It hissed through the air like a dragon's breath, engulfing the space behind her. A scream, brief, then silence. She didn't turn to look. Instead, Aline slid into a crawl space, closed her eyes for 2 seconds and whispered, not out of prayer but out of habit. Then in the quiet that followed, she exhaled once. Reached for her jacket, pulled out the last remaining thermal capsule, the one wired to her old sensor node, and whispered to the Labyrinth, "Let's play," because she wasn't done. She had just begun to bait the others one by one. Before she was sentenced to death, Aline Holt redesigned life itself. At 32, she had been one of Earth's top-tier bioengineers, young, brilliant, insubordinate. In a world where genetic editing had become an arms race, she crossed a line no one wanted to admit existed. She altered the neural pathways of a government-bred predator, not to enhance its lethality, but to reintroduce a primitive empathy circuit, a decision that, according to the tribunal, endangered Earth's military supremacy and revealed treasonous intentions. They called it sabotage. She called it logic. The organism had been too unstable, too reactive. Fixing it had made it less deadly, but more controlled. They didn't want control, they wanted fear. The sentence was swift. No chance for appeal, just a choice between chemical euthanasia or volunteering for the interspecies trial, Thermal Labyrinth, a televised cross-galactic deathmatch held once every 2 cycles. No weapons, no aid, 10 species, 1 survivor. Aline chose the Labyrinth. Not because she valued survival, but because dying in silence was never an option. She spent the next 9 weeks beneath the surface of Titan, Saturn's largest moon, inside a subterranean military installation known as the Hollow. There were no windows, no clocks, just oxygen, orders, and observation. Other contestants trained with weapons. Adapting to new forms of environmental hostility, Aline trained alone. Quiet, controlled, her mind didn't require simulations. It built them. She was the only one not issued a weapon. No blades, no plasma injectors, not even basic armor. Instead, she wore a sleek gray bodysuit laced with thermal reactive mesh, and a single item of her own creation. A visor capable of mapping heat in 3-dimensional spectrum, coded to interpret neural pulse signatures and environmental feedback loops. It wasn't a weapon, but it was precise. It made her aware, and in a place like the Labyrinth, awareness was power. Her handlers didn't trust her. She could see it in the way they stood back, arms behind their backs, lips tight whenever she entered the room. She was never briefed verbally, only given encrypted digital maps that she decrypted without effort. Her eyes saw too much. Her silence unnerved them more than rage ever could. She wasn't angry, not anymore. What had begun as indignation had long calcified into something sharper: detachment. Humanity had chosen to build creatures that killed more efficiently. Aline had tried to do the opposite, and for that they called her a threat. Let them. She memorized the layout of the labyrinth not as a maze, but as an organism. It was constructed from a living tissue substrate, engineered to shift its pathways in response to temperature and motion. Aline recognized the logic behind it immediately: a self-aware battlefield. Not passive terrain, but a predator in its own right. Its corridors could constrict, its walls could secrete heat-reactive spores. And if overstimulated, it would lash out, like a nerve cluster pierced too deep. She learned the patterns, not just where the traps lay, but why they activated. Which sensory glands responded to what level of heat. Where pulse zones were dormant, where artificial spikes had been placed to draw contestants into ambush zones. And then, one night during the final round of diagnostics, she saw something the others didn't. The labyrinth had a heartbeat asterisk. It was faint, delayed, but consistent, a thrum beneath the surface, detectable only in deep heat scan frequencies. Which meant one thing: it wasn't a static system, it was adaptive. Possibly even sentient. They hadn't built a test, they debuilt a creature. She didn't tell anyone. They wouldn't have believed her, and if they did, they might have accelerated its aggression. But in that moment, Aline's objective shifted. She no longer cared about surviving. She wanted to see if intelligence alone, unarmed, unsupported, could outmaneuver both beast and bureaucracy. Not just to live, but to prove something elemental: that being human didn't require killing. That intellect could be an apex trait, that you didn't have to become the monster to beat it. Her handlers assumed her goal was to win, but Aline had no interest in the prize. She didn't want to be a champion of Earth. She had no loyalty left to a system that had disowned her curiosity. All she wanted was to play the game differently, and so when launch day arrived, and she stood on the black steel platform that hung above the gaping maw of the labyrinth, she didn't glance at her competitors. She didn't pray, she didn't steel herself. She just checked the calibration on her visor, adjusted the thermal nodes embedded in her sleeves, and whispered, "Let's see what you really are." Because in the end, it wasn't just her opponents she wanted to defeat. It was the myth, ingrained deep in every species present, that killing made you worthy of survival. She would enter without a weapon, but she would carry something far more dangerous than any blade: conviction. The first hour of the trial shattered every assumption. Aline had expected chaos: competitors charging, traps springing, bodies falling. She had expected violence, panic, desperation, but instead there was silence. No one was dying, yet, because the moment they entered, every species war born tech-bred. Hive synced, realized the labyrinth wasn't a static arena. It was reacting, not just to motion, but to heat. The walls pulsed subtly, as if breathing. Pathways restructured in real time, sealing shut behind warmer targets, opening new routes for colder ones. Vents shifted orientation. Floors emitted faint tremors whenever multiple contestants shared the same corridor for too long. This wasn't a battlefield. It was a *** biological surveillance organism ***, a shifting, living network that interpreted and manipulated thermal data like a hive mind filtering thought. The environment itself was a contestant, and it was watching. Aline stayed quiet, moving through low-heat zones at a steady, deliberate pace. Her thermal visor adjusted continuously, mapping hot and cold gradients in shimmering layers over the organic maze. She quickly noted patterns: heat drew attention, cold confused it. But there was a third behavior, more disturbing. In the west quadrant she spotted something odd. A ripple across the visor feed, like a sudden drop in surface temperature. almost imperceptible, but something was moving toward it. She zoomed in. A shadow, long, skeletal, multi-limbed, emerged from the maze's wall as if peeling itself out of the tissue. It didn't head toward the warmest signals. It glided silently toward a pocket of artificial cold a contestant, attempting to suppress their body heat using cryogel armor. A second later, the signal vanished. No sound, no alert. Just gone. The predator didn't seek heat. It sought absence It hunted silence It devoured what was trying to hide. Elaine's stomach turned. She adjusted the visor's filter, marking cold anomalies in red instead of blue, like reverse blood splatter across the screen. Then came the first message. A Krog, a reptilian quadrupedal species with exposed sensory glands, emerged cautiously from a side corridor. Its body shimmered with kinetic energy, but its eyes locked onto Elaine's visor. It lifted one claw and with slow, deliberate movement etched a symbol into the wall, a single spiral open at one end. Then it drew a heat line through the center. She understood instantly. If you do not emit heat, it will consume your will. It wasn't just flesh the predator absorbed. It ate minds The labyrinth punished not only movement, not only aggression, but fear The act of hiding, suppressing life, silencing one's signal, that was the true bait. The Krog hissed low, dipped its head toward her in what might have been gratitude or surrender, then vanished into the heatless dark. Elaine didn't follow. Her mind raced, every lesson from Titan's Hollow. Every scan, every theoretical model. The predator wasn't just a hunter, it was a regulator. The labyrinth needed thermal motion to breathe. Entities that disrupted the cycle by trying to disappear, by becoming. Voids were removed like blockages in a bloodstream. The trial wasn't just about survival, it was about participation. If you didn't interact, you died, but interaction meant exposure. And exposure meant risk, which led to the next escalation. By the 37th minute, a temporary alliance had formed, 3 species. Humanoid in posture but vastly different in function. A Tarsan brawler with heat-sink gauntlets. A Neric blade spider capable of absorbing energy through its exoskeleton. And a Ixian, a fluid-form being that pulsed like molten chrome. They approached Elaine as she examined a heat vent, visor dimmed. No words, just tension. She knew at the moment they stopped moving, they saw her as vulnerable. Unarmed, disposable, one of them clicked its jaw, a coded signal. A flanking maneuver began. She stepped back, raised her empty hands. Then said clearly, calmly, "You don't want to do this." The Ixian's chest morphed into a spear. No time to argue. She bolted, not away, but toward something she had mapped minutes earlier. A thermal elevation chamber where heat spiked rapidly due to underground pressure pockets. No species had dared enter yet, too unstable, too visible. Perfect, the predators behind her gave chase, expecting her to lead them to a hiding place. Instead, she led them into fire. As she reached the edge of the chamber, she tapped the control patch inside her sleeve. Her thermal visor pulsed once, releasing a phantom heat echo a decoy signature that mimicked her exact body temperature. Now embedded into the floor behind her, she dove to the side. The first pursuer stepped into the chamber. A burst of heat surged from the wall. Not fire, soundless steam, searing hot, invisible, odorless. The predator that hunted the cold must have felt it. The walls began to move A crack split open in the ceiling above. Something slithered downward, half flesh, half fluid, eyeless, mouthless. No sound but the sickening slick of membrane against stone. Elaine crouched in the shadows, watching, waiting. The thermal predator didn't care who had set the trap. It simply responded to the data. Heat surge equals threat. Within seconds, the chamber filled with writhing, slicing limbs, attacking without question. The Ixion vanished in a blink. The Tarsan screamed once, then was crushed. The blade spider tried to scale the wall, but even energy absorption couldn't counter a being made of atmospheric weaponry. When it was over, the chamber pulsed twice, like a satisfied lung exhaling. Eileen remained still, eyes fixed on the walls. The labyrinth had learned from her signal. And it had obeyed. She stood slowly, reset the visor. No emotion in her face, no victory, just confirmation. The game had begun, and she wasn't just playing it. She was rewriting the rules. Elaine had always understood systems better than people. Biological, technological, social, it didn't matter. Patterns emerged if you observed long enough, reactions repeated. Structures revealed weaknesses, and if you learned to manipulate input, you could shift outcome. Now, deep within the labyrinth's neural corridors, she began testing her theory. Heat was language. The predator therm, the apex hunter birthed from the maze's own tissue, didn't simply chase warmth. It interpreted it. It followed patterns, anomalies, disruptions in thermal flow. Most competitors thought staying still or cold would save them. But Eileen saw the inverse truth. The predator was designed to clean the system. If you behaved like noise, you were deleted, so she became signal asterisk. She moved in a zigzag rhythm, brushing her gloved fingers against the moist walls, leaving brief pulses of body heat where skin met membrane. Then she doubled back, kneeling beside floor vents and pressing a heat capsule, siphoned from her own suit, into the soft flesh of the ground, a false trail, a lure asterisk. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was asterisk summoning asterisk. Predator therm didn't respond right away. It never rushed, but the walls around her began to tighten. Humidity increased. A low-frequency thrum echoed from beneath her feet, vibrations like anticipation. Then came the bait. Two competitors, aliens from a high-gravity world, their bodies broad and slow-moving, rounded the corner ahead. They spotted her instantly and charged, thinking she was cornered. They didn't see the soft red glow on the walls, the pulse she'd left behind, the temperature gradient spreading outward like veins. She dropped flat against the floor, slid under a curved overhang, and waited. The first alien stepped into the trap zone. It didn't even have time to scream. The predator therm descended from the ceiling, asterisk melting through it like acid through cloth. Limbs like burning cables wrapped around its prey. Flesh boiled, then turned to ash. The second alien tried to retreat, but too late. The heat bloom triggered another surge. The corridor filled with superheated steam and searing gas. It collapsed mid-scream, voice crackling. Eileen didn't move. Not yet. She waited for the system to calm. Then she stood, dusted grime from her knees, and stepped over what little remained. But not without hearing the last thing the second alien had said, moments before his skin ruptured. "You're human. You know how to make bait of yourself." She felt nothing. Or at least she told herself that. 20 minutes later, the air began to change. The corridors narrowed. The biomechanical skin of the maze shifted color, tinged with blue where it had once pulsed orange. Eileen adjusted her visor and found something unexpected. Cold zones weren't shrinking. They were asterisk watching asterisk. Observation nodes, tiny heatless sphincters set in the ceiling, were tracking her movement. The maze had noticed. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was manipulating it. That's when she met asterisk him. A lone Ilaros, tall, humanoid, covered in reflective plating that shimmered faintly in her thermal view. He emerged from the side of a corridor as she crossed a narrow bridge over a steaming vent shaft. His weaponless hands were raised, his posture unthreatening. but his eyes deep black, no whites were fixed on her face. She froze. Then without a word he stepped forward and shoved her hard out of the way. She crashed onto the stone beside the bridge just as the walkway asterisk collapsed, revealing a pit of bubbling acid. Her visor flared, asterisk acidity spike, 99.7% asterisk. Had she taken another step, she'd be vapor. She scrambled up. You could have said something. The Alaros tilted his head. You don't speak acid, he said flatly. She snorted once, wiping her visor clean. Fair. They walked for a while, cautiously aligned. Not friends, not allies, but not enemies either. Until they reached a cavern where the walls pulsed violently, reacting to residual heat from her previous decoy zone. Burn marks still sizzled on the floor. The Alaros paused, then turned toward her. You did this, she didn't answer. You're using the predator. Baiting it with your own heat to lure others in. It works. I'm sure it does, he said slowly. But do you think that's intelligence or manipulation? She met his gaze. Do you think surviving without claws is immoral? He took a step closer. I think becoming the system's puppet is more dangerous than dying in it. That hit harder than she expected. Eileen looked at the wall scorched raw. She hadn't seen the faces of the ones who burned, just numbers. Temperatures, targets. But wasn't that how it started? The very flaw she had once accused her superiors of. Reducing organisms to patterns, systems to tools. The Alaros gestured at her visor. You're guiding the beast now, but what if it starts responding to you directly? What do you mean? What if? By speaking its language, you're becoming part of it. She had no answer. For the first time, hesitation crept in. She hadn't killed anyone with her hands. But her trails had, her decisions had, and if she was honest, if she allowed herself that moment of dangerous honesty, she had known what would happen. The system was a gun. She just learned how to pull the trigger without touching it. Was that better? Was it worse? They stopped at a junction. Two paths, one led to a thermal vent, a hot zone, the other dipped into silence. A dead corridor, no signals, no life. Eileen stood there, torn. She could use the heat again, trigger another trap. Remove more competitors, keep winning the maze, or she could turn the visor off. Step into the unknown, let instinct not data guide her. The Alaros watched, curious, and to his surprise she took the cold path asterisk. For the first time since the trial began, Eileen Holt chose not to weaponize herself. Not out of mercy, but out of fear, asterisk not of death, but of becoming something she used to fight against asterisk. And the predator, it didn't follow, not yet, only 3 remained. Eileen Holt, Dren of the Alaros, and Varjol, the biomech monstrosity from the hollow stars, a hybrid of flesh circuitry. And hunger. The rest were gone, consumed, melted, suffocated, erased. The labyrinth had closed in now, its corridors narrowing into a pulsating chamber no larger than an old-world gymnasium. Every surface radiated heat, the walls sweated, the air thickened with a strange metallic humidity that clung to the lungs like steam laced with copper, and somewhere nearby the predator-therm was waiting. The chamber's ceiling sealed shut. The floor vibrated, then locked. No exit, no vent, only a mounting crescendo of heat, as if the maze itself was forcing a conclusion. Eileen's visor read asterisk 43, 2 degrees C asterisk and rising. Dren leaned against the curved wall, silent, face unreadable. His armor was scorched. His left arm bled a strange bluish fluid trailing down to his wrist. Across from him, Varjol crouched low, an ugly shape of plated steel and twitching muscle. Sensors rotating behind its translucent face like searchlights spinning in a storm. And in the middle, Eileen stood still, visor flashing warnings. The labyrinth was turning them into bait, all of them. She scanned the room for ventilation ports, escape seams, anything. Nothing. Then suddenly her visor began to flicker asterisk asterisk, losing calibration. The heat saturation overwhelmed its sensors. Patterns collapsed into a mess of noise. Too much input, too many signatures, she stepped back. The visor was becoming a liability. In one motion, Eileen removed it, clenched her jaw, and hurled it across the room. It struck the wall, skidded, and came to rest in a puddle of hissing fluid. Dren's eyes narrowed. "You're blind now." "No," Eileen replied. "I just stopped letting it think for me." She turned to him. His chest plate pulsed faintly. Something was wrong. He noticed her gaze and, after a pause, unstrapped the front of his armor, revealing a small device embedded just left of his heart. A thermal regulator. It blinked weakly, maintaining an artificial cold. "It's been masking your heat signature," Eileen said, stunned. "I knew the Predator would find me eventually," he answered. "This gave me time to decide how I want to die." Varjal let out a mechanical hiss, voice filtered through artificial vocal cords. "Fools, you hide, you speak, you cling to bones and dreams." The maze was never a trial, it was a harvest. We're the last course. Eileen looked between them, sweat streaking her face. Her breathing was shallow now, not from exhaustion, but calculation. Varjal wasn't wrong. The labyrinth had cornered them by design. This wasn't a coincidence. It wanted a conclusion. It wanted one of them to survive, or none at all. But it had always responded to asterisk asterisk heat asterisk asterisk. She looked down at her suit. It was built with emergency thermal pulsing, originally intended to signal rescue beacons. But if she overcharged it manually, she could emit a thermal burst large enough to drown out everything else. Including Varjal, including Dren, maybe even herself. She turned to Dren. "If I become the beacon, will you run?" He blinked. "You'll die. I was sentenced to that long ago, and if the Predator doesn't take the bait." She looked toward the far wall, where her visor still blinked faintly. "Then I'll know what it means to be prey by choice." Without waiting for agreement, Eileen reached into the lining of her suit, found the override panel, and tore the protective seal off the pulse trigger. Sparks danced across her gloves. She set the timer 30 seconds. "Just enough," Varjal sensed it. "You're a fool," it growled. "That thing doesn't distinguish between predator and prey." "You'll burn first." "I'm counting on that," Eileen muttered. Dren stepped back, eyes locked on her. Then the temperature dropped. Instantly, the walls went still. The heat in the room coalesced, like breath being held. And then it came. The Predator therm. It asterisk phased through the rear wall, not walking, not crawling, but displacing space like liquid shadows in reverse. It was larger now, almost doubled in size. Its limbs hung like cords of smoldering copper. Its face, if it had one, was a mass of shifting sensors and glimmering filaments. But it stopped, right in front of Eileen. She didn't flinch. Didn't speak. Her suit screamed, pulse building. Her entire body lit up on the infrared like a sun breaking through a blizzard. She thought of Titan. She thought of the tribunal. She thought of every moment she had manipulated heat, used it like a blade, guided a creature toward death, always from a distance. Now it was asterisk here, asterisk asterisk, staring, not attacking, feeling. She didn't move. Neither did the Predator. For 5 full seconds it simply stood, absorbing. And then it turned. It turned away from her, its head rotated slightly. Toward the far wall. Toward Varjal asterisk asterisk, who, in a panic, activated every defense system it had. Plasma vents burst open. Shock pulses detonated around its frame. It howled, lashed out, but the Predator was already on it. There was no scream, only a asterisk rending asterisk. One moment Varjal existed. The next, it was ribbons of metal and steam and dissolving flesh. The maze exhaled. The temperature dropped. The chamber opened, hissing, unfolding, revealing a tunnel bathed in amber light. Elaine's pulse trigger clicked, timer expired, her body remained whole. Dren moved beside her. You knew it would spare you. No, she said, I didn't. Then why do it? She looked at the patch where Varjol had stood. Then at her hands, then at Dren. Because someone had to stop making heat into a weapon. And in that moment, for the first time, the predator didn't look like a monster. It looked like something that finally understood. Only two remained. Elaine and Dren stood in silence, surrounded by walls that no longer pulsed, no longer whispered. The chamber was dying, collapsing in on itself like an exhausted lung. The biomechanical tissue peeled back in places, exposing raw muscle underneath, twitching and spasming. Veins of light surged up the walls, pulsing red. The temperature stabilized, but the air had changed thicker, heavier. Above them, a rectangular aperture cracked open in the ceiling, casting a narrow shaft of crimson light. It swept across the floor, scanning. A voice, mechanical, omnipresent, echoed from nowhere and everywhere. Asterisk trial complete. One thermal entity may exit. Please designate. And just like that, the illusion of shared survival shattered. Elaine and Dren turned to face each other. No words. Not yet. The predator was gone, or at least dormant. The labyrinth had no more prey to consume. The system was waiting for a choice. Or a death. Dren stepped forward slowly, raising his right hand, not to strike, not to threaten, but open-palmed. A gesture of peace. If you walk out, he said quietly, your species will turn this place into a weapon. Elaine didn't move. I know how your leaders think, Dren continued. They'll study your neural logs, your heat traces, your decisions. They'll say she survived because she understood the beast. They'll build their own. She looked at the red aperture above them. The shaft of light had narrowed. I didn't come here to represent them, she said. I came because they tried to kill me for doing the opposite of what they wanted. Dren tilted his head. Then why not let me go instead? Because I don't believe in dying for a species that never asked me to live for them. There was no venom in her voice, only truth, quiet and worn. She took one step forward. If only one of us walks out, the system wins, she said. It reduces everything to a binary, victory or defeat. Kill or die. Dren's gaze flicked to the ceiling. The light was now blinking, waiting. Input required. Elaine reached into her suit, pulled out a final thermal capsule, small, crystalline, pulsing faintly. It was designed for rescue beacons, a last-ditch flare meant to signal for pickup. But she hadn't used it to call for help. She'd reprogrammed it. Split the signal in half. She pressed it into her palm, then held it out toward Dren. He frowned. You're sharing your signature. I'm overriding the exit logic, she said. If it can't tell which of us is alive, maybe it lets both anomalies go. Or maybe it kills us both, she offered a half-smile. Isn't that the point of the trial, risking the one thing you didn't want to lose? He stared at her for a long moment. Then nodded. Together they stepped into the red light. The capsule activated, projecting two identical thermal signatures, mirrored, entangled. The system paused. Word buzzed with a noise that sounded almost confused. Then the light turned white. Exit granted. A hole opened in the floor, not a trapdoor but a soft tunnel. Like the throat of something that had stopped trying to digest. They stepped into it, and the world outside met them not with applause. Not with fireworks or brass fanfare, but with sterile silence and cold steel. They emerged into a decontamination chamber. Dozens of masked observers stood behind reinforced glass, analyzing, recording. Whispering, no one approached. No one cheered. Elaine's feet touched real floor for the first time in days. She took a breath, then another. Her visor, broken and melted, lay somewhere behind her in the maze's ruin. She didn't care. Dren stood beside her, posture straight, unreadable. His people would ask why he didn't kill her when he had the chance. But he wouldn't have an answer they could accept, because survival wasn't the same as victory. And not all victories left corpses. Later, in the debriefing file that would circulate across half the galaxy, one line from the Labyrinth's final log would confuse analysts for years. Thermal anomaly unresolved. Dual signal, indistinguishable intent, override coexistence. And in a forgotten corner of Titan's archive, someone would find a note scrawled in human handwriting. Maybe surviving isn't about who dies last. Maybe it's about who chooses not to be the reason someone else does. And beneath it, there was no winner, no medal, no monument. Elaine Holt's name was never etched into any hall of honor. There was no broadcast, no press conference, no announcement to Earth's military council declaring her survival. The thermal labyrinth had ended, quietly, like a fever breaking. Two beings stepped out, but neither claimed victory. And perhaps that was the point. Within 72 hours, the entire complex surrounding the labyrinth was sealed. The neural systems powering the maze were shut down and cryo-locked. Security reports labeled the project unstable in moral architecture and unpredictable in systemic bias. No species requested a rematch. No funding was renewed. The trial was over, not because it had failed, but because it had revealed something far worse. It had worked. And no one wanted to see how. Elaine disappeared. Slipped away from the medical debrief, away from the cameras and the quiet interrogation attempts. By the time Earth Command realized she was gone, her thermal signature had already vanished into deep space. Some say she fled to a dead moon orbiting Kepler 88c, where no scanner could track residual heat beyond a fraction of a degree. Others believe she buried herself under the frozen crust of a drifting comet, rewriting her biology to mimic the stone around her. One unconfirmed sighting placed her on the tundra of a planet with no recorded name, wrapped in heat-dampening cloth, living alone among methane winds, but no one really knew. No one ever found her again, and that was exactly what she wanted. She had survived not by killing, not by overpowering her enemies, but by outthinking the machine built to punish empathy. By baiting the beast with her own warmth, not to destroy, but to distract. She had chosen not to kill, even when it was safer, even when every rule of survival screamed at her to strike first. She had made herself visible when others turned cold. She had stopped being a weapon, and that story spread. Not in data logs or scientific journals, but in whispers. Among the lower decks of long-haul space crews, around the dying campfires on forgotten planets. Among the orphans of war who watched the stars through cracked domes, her legend grew. They didn't call her a warrior. They called her the one who chose to burn. A human who had understood that heat wasn't just survival. It was signal It was presence It was life . And when the system demanded, she used that heat to kill. She used it to draw the danger away, to protect others from having to make that choice. A woman who had faced a predator designed to seek and destroy, and made it pause. A woman who had chosen to be the reason someone else lived. And somewhere in the memory banks of the labyrinth, now locked and buried under administrative silence, one final entry remained. It had no coordinates, no timestamp, just a single unfiltered line of data, signal source 1, active, no intent to eliminate. The labyrinth had recognized her, not as a contestant, but as something else, not prey, not predator, deviation. An anomaly that chose not to respond the way it was programmed to. And perhaps that is what frightened the system most. Because if even one organism refused to follow the logic of domination, of killing to win, Then the whole structure of the game began to collapse. The moral architecture unraveled. What happens when intelligence says no? What happens when you survive without becoming a monster asterisk? That was the question Aline left behind, not as a warning, but as a challenge, a provocation to every species who believed the only path forward was conquest. And so, if you ever find yourself standing in a cold place, hunted by something that sees you only as heat, remember what she did. She didn't extinguish her warmth to survive. She turned it into a choice. A signal, a shield, a voice. And if you are human, asterisk, truly human, asterisk, then perhaps the final words she never got to say are meant for you. If you are human, don't ask how many your technology can kill. Ask instead, can you choose not asterisk to kill, when killing is the only thing that guarantees your survival? Because courage isn't what keeps you alive. It's what keeps you from becoming the thing that survives at any cost asterisk. And Elaine Holt knew, some costs are too high even for life.